Hi, Thea. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I am so excited to have you here and just to get all of your wisdom and insights when it comes to buying and retail. So, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Okay. So, starting off, I want to hear a little bit about your background. Like, how did you even get into fashion buying? And yeah, how'd that go?
Yeah, well, actually, I really had a passion in fashion. I mean, it's very cliche to say. It's well known in the industry not to say that, but yeah, I actually started when I was a teenager, and I think it was because I went to a V&A exhibition about haute
Mhm.
couture. So I think I was about 13 or 14 over in North Wales in a really tiny small town. I suddenly became interested in fashion and kind of, was reading magazines, interested in textiles and art at school. So that's really where it all started. So from then on, I wanted to go to university. I was desperate to come to London, and I decided to go to London College of Fashion. Luckily, they let me in as well, and I got onto a fashion management course. So I studied there for 4 years and actually did a placement in industry during that time as well. Was very lucky enough to be at Selfridges during my placement year, which was really a great insight into the industry. Finished my studies specializing in buying and merchandising. And then, I managed to have a foot in the door at Selfridges. So then when I graduated from university, I found out there was a job opening there, and I went back into the team on the menswear department. So that's where it all started. And then since then, I've been in the buying departments of various stores in London for 12 years now.
Amazing. And yeah, we were actually talking about it. We actually met some way. Don't quite remember. It's been a long time, but through working at Selfridges when I was doing sales at
Yes,
Joy Rich. Yeah.
exactly. Yes, it's a very small world when you're inside it, and when you've been here for 10 years, you know so many people.
Yes. And Selfridges is such an iconic store to get your career started. You were very fortunate.
I was so lucky, and I still think that today, it was by chance really that my university sent off my CV to Selfridges. So, I can only thank them so much for what they did for me, because it really just kicked off my career in the most positive way. And, after that, I spent 6 years at Selfridges, kind of really working my way up all the way through the buying team, starting as a buyer's admin, progressing to assistant buyer, moving on to women's wear, and then, eventually moving on from there. But, I started my whole career there.
Yeah, that's so amazing. So, besides Selfridges, what other stores have you worked for and like what categories have you bought for? Because I think a lot of people don't know that when you're working with bigger department stores or bigger retailers, there's actually different buyers for each category across the board.
Yes, especially the bigger department stores, bigger online stores. There's multiple departments, split between men's, women's, children's, and then you have
Mhm.
home and beauty. So there is a vast array of departments in most of these stores. So I actually started on the menswear team, as I mentioned, at Selfridges, got up to assistant buyer level on menswear. Then I decided to switch over to women's wear because ultimately, obviously I have a personal interest in fashion, and, I really, really wanted to work with women's wear brands. And I thought I could apply my objective skills that I'd learned from the menswear department into the women's wear department as well. Because as a buyer, you need to be quite objective. You're not just buying things for yourself. You need to think about the customer first and foremost.
Yeah.
So I was on the women's wear contemporary department at Selfridges for 2 years. Then I decided that I really wanted to get more online experience. So, somewhere that didn't have any physical stores, and really learn how they operate. So that I then went to Net-a-Porter, where I was doing the same product category. So women's contemporary ready to wear, where I was there for 4 years. And then, after that time there, I really felt like I wanted to gain experience in a different product category completely. So an opportunity came up at LNCC. So I went there to do lifestyle, which encompasses sunglasses, jewelry, homeware, beauty. We were also looking to bring in a bigger offer of books and technology. So I've really kind of worked across now quite a few number of categories.
Yeah, you've seen it all. That's
I've
great.
seen a lot. Yeah, I've seen a lot of it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, working with all of these brands, I'm sure every shop, every retailer works a little different when you're dealing with business. I think buying across the board has the same concept. You're onboarding brands, you're discovering new things, all of that. But I'm curious, how did you guys go about onboarding new brands? Was it trade show route? What did you get outreach? Like, what did that look like when you're finding new brands to bring on for any of those?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there was definitely a time I used to go to trade shows
Mm.
earlier in my career. I think the discovery element is not as kind of valid there. I think it's more difficult now to find brands at trade shows as such, in the format that we're used to seeing.
Mhm.
For me, I would definitely be looking for social media a lot, be finding new brands.
Mhm.
Some of my biggest success stories have come from brands that I've found, majority of which on Instagram. Obviously,
Wow.
we have TikTok now, but, personally, I think Instagram is still more of a kind of hub for really, finding new things. But also, there's an element of networking, of your contacts in the industry. Sometimes people that come to you with an exciting new brand if they're,
Mhm.
for example, the owner of a showroom. I think it's really, important to nurture those relationships with, people in the industry, because often they will come to you if they have an opportunity to kind of bring on this exciting new brand. So, it's kind of, there's various ways of finding new things. Personally, I think when buyers find the brand, those are probably the most successful from anything, because, as a buyer, you get a lot of emails through from brands
Oh,
that you've
yeah.
never heard of, a lot. But obviously we tried to reply to all of them, but there's so many, it's quite difficult sometimes to get through them all. And sometimes you just have to write a quick reply. We try to give them as much feedback as possible, but
Yeah.
it's not always possible when you're in the heat of market.
Right.
So, I think people sending things in the post, as well. But, I think the best way to contact buyers is kind of Instagram and email, and seeing them in person. You get to build a rapport with the brands, which I think is always great, to kind of
Mhm.
hear the story, meet them in person if there's the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Wow. So this is giving me some insight because things have obviously shifted, especially before the pandemic, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
trade shows were so much more of a thing before then. And then I heard from a lot of buyers that it was like after pandemic, like they weren't getting sent out at all, especially in the US. I think US market. So yeah, they were doing appointments,
Yeah.
showroom appointments, things like that. But I don't think I thought so much of Instagram. I've seen brands get discovered on Instagram, but, like, you're right, that would be more of a thing now when social media is such a big platform, especially throughout the years. It's increased so much in visibility.
Yeah, and I think, there's multiple elements to that. It's discovering the brand pages themselves, but also I think, personally also I look at influencers. What are these key
Mm,
influencers wearing? Because sometimes they do have, products and looks from emerging designers, and you think, oh, where's that from? That looks amazing. And then it kind of invites you to discover other brands you may not have heard of. So, I kind of look at it from multiple ways.
yeah. And what do you think of brand when you are on Instagram and just doing your research, what makes a brand stand out to you?
I think imagery is really important, the content
Mhm.
that a brand produces,
Totally.
the aesthetic that you represent and the way that you showcase the brand. Ultimately, obviously, you look at how many followers they have, but I think it all stems really from how strong a business they have for themselves. Do they have a direct to consumer business themselves? Because I think that's important for a brand to consider now, because
Sure.
I think it makes it even more appealing to a retailer if the brand has established a website, they're selling products themselves. Therefore, they also have an understanding of who their customer is.
Right.
They can really appeal to that particular customer that they see shopping from them. They can have conversations with them, any customer service inquiries or, fit feedback they might get as well. I think there's more ways now to interact with the customer. And I think that's really important to kind of build that following, because ultimately, a brand, whether it thrives or not, is partly about its brand awareness. And as
Right.
a brand grows, it really needs to increase its brand awareness. And, part of that is social media. Also having more retail partners is another way to build their awareness as well. But I think ultimately they need to be, behind that, supporting, the growth of the business by, making sure that they're reflecting the aesthetic and, what the customer wants.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think also, would you say that press plays a big part in it? Because I remember for Joy Rich, the brand that we were speaking about, I think a lot of the reason why we were visible was because of press. We were getting a lot of press at the time. And so I feel like a lot of retailers were reaching out to us because of that. We were getting a lot of attention. So do you feel like press still plays a part when it comes to brand discovery? Are brands that are kind of creating a buzz, does that catch your eye?
I think so, yeah. I mean, whether it's celebrity press or whether it's magazine editorial press, obviously
Mhm.
now a lot of magazines are more digital than they used to be in terms of print issue. But for sure, it's another reference point to see what those magazines, what those publications are talking about. And obviously, what they're saying are the new and exciting things coming out. We definitely take notice of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So as far as pitching, because you say you do get a lot of emails, so uh, brands are still using that method to reach out to you as a buyer. So I'm curious with the emails and the pitches, what are some common mistakes that you kind of notice when it comes to pitches, or what makes a great pitch that actually gets your attention? Hey friend, have you been curious about wholesaling your fashion brand? Well, I have some exciting news for you. We have an upcoming workshop called Unlocking Retail Success: 3 strategies for getting your fashion brand into retail stores. And it's just around the corner. In this exclusive workshop, we're diving deep into the strategies that will help you secure your brand spot on retail shelves. Whether you're just starting out or looking to expand your reach, these proven tactics will pave the way for your success. Join us as we uncover the secrets to navigating the competitive world of retail, from building lasting partnerships to maximizing your brand's visibility. You'll walk away with actionable insights that you can implement right away. So don't miss out on this invaluable opportunity to unlock the doors to retail success. Reserve your spot now at makegoodfashion.com/wholesale or check the description for the link. Trust me, friend, you are not going to want to miss this.
Yeah, I think if the brand has a really strong story behind it, or if there's certain concepts that they're, presenting to us that's really unique, that really stands out to me. But I think also, one of the first things I click on when someone sends me an email is their lookbook. And it's whether the lookbook impresses me, whether I feel like the product in the lookbook is cohesive, the aesthetic of the lookbook, does it feel like it would suit the audience that we are targeting?
Right.
Does it align with our brand mix? There's multiple factors that we're looking at when we're going through, lookbooks. But that's the first port of call, I would say, is starting with the product. But also, I think, it's important that they do send really strong imagery, because if they're just reaching out speculatively but don't send any assets to us, we can't really say much until we receive those assets from them.
Right.
And I kind of mentioned before, sometimes they may send something in the post, for example, a gift, which, personally, I don't think is necessarily the best way. Maybe it gets their attention, but I think I prefer an email or something digital, something electronic that I can really look at in detail.
Sure. And would you say that a line sheet is not enough? Because I find that, brands will send line sheets over and the pictures are like this small. It's this.
Yes. I mean, obviously, it's necessary to have the line sheet because we do want to have a look at the prices as well, because ultimately it's important that the prices align with where we feel the pricing should sit.
Yeah.
I would say send both. But I think, a representation of your brand DNA through imagery is the strongest way to really catch someone's attention, because most buyers have an eye for trend, for product. So you really need to kind of capture their imagination with what you're presenting, and visuals are always a great way to catch a buyer's attention.
Yeah. And speaking off of something that you just said about trend, I want to talk a little bit about that too, because I feel that one thing that people don't consider is that when you start a brand, and if you want retail partnerships and to really grow, you kind of have to conform a bit to what is happening in the industry and trends and all of that. So how important is trend for you as a buyer and when you are looking for brands to onboard?
I would say there's definitely 2 ways that we can look at this. There's a lot, obviously we work in fashion. There's a lot of brands that do create trends themselves, or they do align with multiple trends during the season. There are trend-led brands out there, but then there's also, multiple brands out there who kind of have their own trend. It's more of a seasonless style that they update every season, kind of wardrobing. And it's something that we've definitely seen in the last few seasons, even few years now, but this quiet luxury trend that we've seen.
Yeah.
Because I think with the sustainability conversation, customers are considering how much space they have in their wardrobe, how much they're spending on their wardrobe. Sustainability, they're maybe buying secondhand, they may be, selling their products to then, rent things or buy things secondhand. And I think they're much more conscious now of what what they're actually buying. So I think, there is also an argument for brands that can have this kind of seasonless wardrobing, within their collection. A capsule wardrobe, for example, for a customer to build up, just adding one key piece here and there. So they're not necessarily buying maybe as much as they used to, but they're really considering what they are buying and buying good quality as well. So I would say there's an argument for both being able to work within the industry at the moment and definitely going forward.
Yeah, yeah, I love that more brands are creating these timeless looks that can be worn in and out of season. So I think that's a great point. Circling back to just buyer outreach and all of that, I think one thing that can be kind of polarizing for people is like, how do I even get in touch with a buyer? Like, where are people finding contacts, all of that? And I know it's something that buyers probably don't want to freely give because, like you said, you get tons and tons of emails. But how would you say that brands should go about that? Is it wise to maybe reach out on LinkedIn first and get a contact or, I know you can partner with showrooms and that's a great outlet because they already have those relationships built. And so it's almost like an easier way if you can get represented. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly had friends reach out to me on LinkedIn before, and I always try to reply to most people that try to connect with me if I feel like they're relevant, or
Yeah,
whether they're not relevant. I try to be honest and, at least give them some feedback.
you're
But I
very
think,
kind.
but I think, what I particularly like is when, it's a contact that I already know, maybe through a showroom,
Hmm.
if they take on a brand, it's great if they come to me and say, we have this amazing brand because, I may be visiting the showroom anyway. So it's, something that I can see whilst I'm on my appointment schedule during market.
Sure.
Obviously that maybe that's not possible in all cases for brands, but I think for sure, I think the expertise that comes with a showroom, you know, gives more relevance behind, the brand and going to see the brand.
Absolutely. And any tips for I know you're not on the showroom side, but maybe you can provide some insight or advice on this. Any tips for brands who are looking to get represented via showroom?
That is a good question. I think it's similar to approaching a buyer, I would say.
Mhm.
Obviously showrooms have their terms and conditions as well. So it may not be right for everybody. And,
Sure.
at times brands do kind of prefer to bring in their own in-house salesperson, and maybe they
Mhm.
bring on someone into their own sales team who has experience within the industry and has contacts already.
Right.
That's another way for them to be able to reach out to the relevant buyers with someone who has the skills, the knowledge, the experience of dealing with the contacts that they're looking to get hold of. It's not a showroom's not right for everyone. I think some brands prefer to manage themselves. So it depends really at what stage in their development they're at and kind of where they would like to target, what stores they would like to be in.
Yeah. And how important would you say it is for I mean, I already know the answer to this question, but I just want to get your insights because I feel that it's really important to vet the stores that you want to be in too, right? Like you shouldn't reach out to every store just as like to generate more revenue. It has to be the right placement. And so for brands looking to get placement and let's say they want to be in like a Selfridges, what type of research should they be doing to make sure that their brand's even a right fit for the store and what you guys are looking for?
Yeah, I mean, there may be international brands and they may not be in the country where the store is located, but I think for
Sure.
sure if they can visit the physical store, definitely a bonus to see, what the layout it looks like, what brand was sat next to each other, just to kind of picture where they would see themselves in the store. Obviously, if it's an online business, check out the website, see how products, are filtered in new in and what brand mix do they have on there, just to see if they think that the brand mix, and therefore the target customer would align with what they're doing. Because I think it is, as you said, I don't think it's a kind of, you know, go out to everybody approach when you're
Yeah.
especially a small brand starting out. I think it is important to be quite selective about where you are placed because you can build that awareness and you can build your stockist and your distribution over time. But I think having too much saturation in the market when you're a small brand may be to the detriment of your sales and your performance and therefore the
Mm.
longevity and success of the brand. I think some brands definitely go too big too quickly. and it's whether they can sustain that from a, both internal and external capacity. Can they actually produce the amount of stock that they need? Cash flow is obviously difficult for small brands. And if they're growing hugely, that may become a problem. So I think it's about knowing the limits and, growing organically, I think is a really sensible approach.
Sure. And I'm curious because I've seen that too, where brands grow very quick and they can't really,
Yeah.
handle all the things that are happening. So what are some of those things that you've seen with brands who grow too quick, and why you would caution brands from, seeking out too much distribution too soon?
Yeah, I think the main kind of issue is there's a lot of the same product out in the market. So if the collection is not huge in itself, then you also have all of the major retailers on board and some boutique. The customer is seeing that product on multiple websites. So what they're doing is they're going to be looking, oh, who's got the best price, or who's got the cheapest shipping option, or what's the
Right.
quickest shipping option, or best customer service. So they're going to be very savvy when they're looking at this product. If they can find it on 10 different websites, they're going to choose probably wherever the cheapest option is. And I think for a small brand, especially, building up that customer base, I don't think it's good to have too many outlets that are all competing for that same customer, because ultimately, it's going to grow very quickly, but then the demand is just going to drop off,
Yeah.
which ultimately will affect the performance. And, unfortunately, retailers do have to assess businesses and whether they continue to buy brands season after season if the performance is not up to the targets that they set.
Yeah. So, would you say that in that case, exclusivity is kind of important, especially when you're working with bigger stores, right? Like, let's say you have huge department stores, multiple across the board. How does exclusivity play into that?
I mean, there was a time, years ago, I think that there was more room for exclusivity. I think now I wouldn't necessarily advise brands to do exclusivity deals, because I think it does limit what you can do and, how you can expand and grow. To a certain extent, if it's a short period, it may be worth their while for sure, because if it's, the exposure that they would like and, the order is of a size that they can deal with and work for them initially, yeah, maybe a short-term period of exclusivity. But I think it's important, sometimes it helps sales as well if there's a couple of retailers on board, because it does increase the brand awareness in the market and to the consumer. So, I think sometimes when it's exclusive, it's maybe not getting the same traction as if there was a couple more stockists.
Right. That's good advice. And then as far as product offering goes, so, a lot of brands, especially that start direct to consumer, their product offering, sometimes it's very small, like they're just starting out, maybe a couple pieces. And I think when it comes to, working with retailers, you want to have a nice offering for buyers to choose from, right? So I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious, what would you say that needs to look like? How many pieces minimum should people have on their line sheet? Like, what do you look for when it comes to merchandising when you are looking to bring on a line?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a ready-to-wear perspective anyway, I
Yeah.
think it's important to have looks that you can create for the customer, wardrobing pieces that match or go together or can be styled in different ways with other parts of the collection. I think it's important to consider when you're buying for a physical store, such as a department store, they are buying by rail. So if you have one rail, they'll need X amount of options, which may be 10 options, for example. If they're going to give you two rails, that would be 20 options. They may buy a slight addition as a contingency. If some styles sell out, they want to make sure the rail's not half empty.
Right.
And obviously seasons will then start to overlap. So they're then planning for those seasonal overlaps as well. Obviously online is slightly different because there's no definitive SKU count that they need to hit. It just depends how much of the collection they like, they feel is strong, they want to represent. But I would say as a guideline, at least 8 to 12 options for, a small brand, maybe one that we're picking up that's brand new. I wouldn't really want to buy less than that. But obviously, I don't also want to be buying the whole collection. I'm
Mhm.
expecting to leave something from the showroom that I haven't picked up. So I think it's just being mindful of that, and also thinking about whether you're going to have your best seller in two colorways to
Mhm.
offer to retailers, for example. That's a really great way also of having differentiation in the offer. Because I think another thing, if the collection isn't huge, is as I was saying before, all the retailers don't want to have exactly the same offer as each other because they each want
Right.
to have their own point of view and their point of difference and be relevant for their own customer. So, I think it's also better if different retailers have a different offer.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And when you say 8 to 12 pieces, do you mean you want to take on 8 to 12 pieces or just to see? Because obviously, like you said, you're not going to take everything. So if there's
Yeah.
only 8 to 12 pieces in the line sheet, then maybe you would take 4 or something like that.
Yeah, I would probably never order less than 8 because it depends really what website you're looking at because quite often you look at how many you're displaying on a page on the
Hmm.
website, for example. So you may want to have 3 rows of product. So you may be buying 9 pieces, for example,
Sure.
because a lot of it is about how the customer sees the product, whether that's on a shop floor or on a website.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Well, you guys get your collections together. Okay. So I'm curious because a lot of times I think when you go into like a department store, you see a lot of legacy brands, right? Like brands that have been in these stores for years and years and years. And so I think for new designers, that can feel a little bit intimidating because it's like, how do I compete against like a Ralph Lauren or, whatever it may be, or these huge brands? And so, besides, I think, you were saying good imagery when you're finding brands online, some that are on trend, or even brands that are timeless. Like, what sets these brands apart that are new brands that you're onboarding that makes you, as a buyer, want to take a chance on them?
I think it's, whether it has that distinct design DNA. Often we kind of talk about this red thread, this handwriting that goes through the collection. So, season on season, you'll go and see the collection and oh, that's that brand.
Sure.
I think that's really important because that's what sets all these iconic brands apart is their brand value, their, core DNA. I think also coupled in with that, obviously quality is a factor. You need to be looking at, does the price of this product match the quality that we're seeing? I think, sometimes new brands can kind of pitch themselves maybe in the wrong price bracket. And I think that's important to
Mhm.
get right from the very beginning is making
Yeah.
sure that your architecture of pricing, you set it out when you start your markup, your profit margins are where they need to be when you first go into the wholesale market because it's very difficult to change that down the line. But I think, as I said earlier as well, having a direct to consumer business can help this because you kind of have an understanding of what is working and you can develop what's working and see what's not working. And it can help to inform, future decisions about which direction you take the brand into.
Yeah, that's so true because I think you get such valuable feedback from your customers if you're really paying attention to what's working and checking those analytics of, if you have that direct consumer brand to start off with, of like what's selling well. And then I think it's nice to also inform the buyers, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, about what is working on your end, what are best sellers. I think you guys are looking also for brands to provide you with this helpful information. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's totally invaluable when brands know what their customers want from them and they understand the customer because, that's where brands go wrong, I think, is when they don't have that touch point with them or, they don't really understand or they're not developing the things that, they're getting feedback on every day when they're selling products, or when things are not selling. And they definitely use that. And for sure, it's useful to the buyers, but it's also useful to the brand itself in terms of developing further. And I think, ultimately, especially in department store environments, brands only have spaces if they're making money. At the end of the day, obviously there's key brands that, stores have to have, but they're also selling products, and ultimately there are profit targets, there's sell-through targets that all these stores are looking at when they're, looking at space in store and adjusting accordingly.
Yeah. I'm curious from your end too, with the brands that are not moving, that you're not saying good sell through from, what are some common points that you see that is causing that? Like when I think about it, I'm thinking like, some brands don't do proper fitting, so the fit is off and then pieces can't move. Or like you said, the price is not aligned with the quality. So are there any other factors that you've kind of noticed that cause brands to kind of not move off the shelf?
Yeah, I think sometimes I do wonder if it's brand awareness, when it's a
Mhm.
completely unknown brand that
Sure.
is completely new. Sometimes there is, buzz around some brands. I can think of a few examples of brands that we've kind of launched brand new, but, they've sold particularly well because there's been, especially on social media, a bit of a buzz around them. And I think, you can take a chance on some brands, but ultimately, if the customer kind of doesn't know them, they may, decide to go to a more well-known brand they've already
Mhm.
heard of before. If, for example, the price isn't quite what they expected. I think fit's also super important because, there are times when you do see high returns on certain products,
Yeah.
in particular, which obviously isn't great for the sell-through.
Yeah. I'm curious how can brands do their part to support these stores? Because I think sometimes people can look at wholesale and they're like, "Okay, I'm just gonna ship my goods and then, hope for the best." But how can brands also support retail when it comes to, helping create that brand awareness or any other way that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it earlier. I think press, having someone doing your press and reaching out to, you know, whoever it may be, whether it's editorial, kind of online publications, trying to get the product featured there, being able to share that content as well, obviously would be great to build awareness of the brand. Whether influencers or celebrities are wearing the brand, we've seen certain products fly off the shelves because someone
Mhm.
famous has just worn it. You know, Not always easy to do, but for
Yeah.
sure we've seen success with that in the past. There's things that brands can do in store, like to incentivize staff, for example. The staff that are working on the shop floor, brand incentives to kind of, try and get the sales staff to sell the product, and also there's potentially marketing opportunities with these partners as well, in terms of, online editorial and features that they can potentially be involved in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, working with the retailer and creating those incentives, because I don't think that people know that they have the leverage to do that as well. I've kind of seen it done where some brands will do like training for retail staffs or help share some of the selling points of the pieces or even give away free pieces to staff to have. And I
Yeah.
think that's really helpful too, so that they can be bought into the brand mission as well.
For sure. And, even when I was working in an online retailer, there's definitely been brand presentations to internal staff, whether that's the styling team, the marketing team, the press team, so that everybody is aware we have this brand coming in. They talk a little bit about the collection. I
Mhm.
think if everybody has that buy-in and people in the team are aware, they get excited about the product that's coming in, I think, there's obviously more potential that they could get featured or there could be some level of awareness there from internal teams to push the brand.
Yeah, that's great. And so, lastly, I'm kind of curious if there are any like evolving trends or consumer preferences that you're noticing on the market right now. I know sustainability has been a big one, which I think is now just, I don't think it's even just like a trend. It's just you need to have this at this point. It's something that I think
Yeah.
every brand should just be doing. But what have you seen?
I would agree. I think, in the times that we're living in, climate change, fashion is unfortunately one of the biggest polluters in terms of industry. So I think for me, now if I saw a new brand, I want to be seeing some sort of sustainability story. And I think, especially now with the, Gen Z, customers coming through as well, it's kind of higher on their list than it is on maybe older consumers in terms of something that they're looking for. I think there has to be alternative options that are better, essentially.
Sure.
Obviously, no one's perfect. No one can
Mhm.
be 100% sustainable, but I think it's making strides and doing something better, just making that effort in some way is definitely a way forward. As I mentioned, there's lots of rental platforms now, resale, things like that. So I think it's being mindful of the fact that customers are maybe buying less, but buying better.
Yeah.
So I think they are willing to really splash out on that key piece that they absolutely love if they feel it's the right price and it fits in their wardrobe and it goes with other things in their wardrobe. So I think there's ways to be sustainable, both from, the manufacturing process, but also, just in terms of volume as well.
Yeah, that's so good. And like I mentioned before, like this is just the norm now. And it's so nice to see that brands are able to do this retail and then also communicate it as well, because I think that's important too. is to kind of
Yeah.
communicate that so that customers know as well.
Yeah, totally. And, something that really grabs me as a buyer as well, if I hear a really amazing story about the way that they're producing their product, like it just inspires me as well. And it really gets me interested if I hear, for example, they're supporting local communities in a rural area because they're giving work to these communities, they're giving them fair wages and, they're kind of giving back as well as, producing clothes and, they're giving them a livelihood. So I think, that's just one example of something I've
Yeah.
heard in the past. But I think, it also kind of speaks to your point about how do you get buyers' attention?
Yeah. I'm curious. Oh, actually, this last one, I know I said that one's the last one, but just piggybacking off of this, like, how can brands effectively communicate that when working with retail? Because it's one thing, when you're pitching to a buyer and saying, like, this is our story and, it's just very compelling. But when you go into the store, you just see the clothes on the rack, right? So, what are some ways or creative ways that you think that brands can communicate that story so customers who are just walking on the store floor can kind of get that feel?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen, like special swing tags on clothing. Although, one aspect of that is that maybe it's not so sustainable to add more swing tags onto a garment, whether that's a QR code on there that links to a
Mhm.
video or, links to their website where there's further information on it, whether it's on a swing tag that they would already be putting on the garment. It is a tricky one because, yeah, like how do you communicate that whilst being sustainable?
Yeah. Well, you know what?
on
For a brand that I worked with, we did recycled hang tags. So I'm like, it's something, you know?
Yeah, so there's creative solutions. But I think,
Yeah.
also thinking about which stores you align yourself could definitely help that because, you know, more and more stores now have sustainability projects and they do certain campaigns during the year focusing on sustainability. So, if the brand can be involved in those sorts of schemes that stores are running at certain points in the year, that's another way to kind of build awareness of the fact that, they're doing this. Obviously online, you can put badges on products to say this is sustainable or this fits into a certain pillar of sustainability that the store is kind of, and there's obviously a lot more detail online about all the different things that these retailers are kind of looking at in terms of sustainability. But I think also, having content on the brand's own website to
Yeah.
talk about what they're doing and, even share pictures or videos, you can see some really compelling videos that brands have created about, even just how things have been made or, behind the scenes look, at the makers, for example.
Yeah, that's good. Because a lot of times if I'm in a store and I see a brand that I'm not familiar with, I'll just, like, quickly Google it and see, what
Yeah.
information I can find so I can see how that could be helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Or again, back to Instagram, straight on
Yeah,
the, Instagram
exactly.
page to see what their aesthetic looks like, how do
Mhm.
they represent themselves and what content are they sharing.
That's good. So you guys keep your feeds beautiful and keep telling stories. So, any last words of wisdom, encouragement, or advice to emerging designers, again, that are looking to get retail placement and expand and just be successful in this industry?
I think you need to really stay true to your vision, just really kind of focus and hone in on what your DNA is, what is, your handwriting, what does your brand represent? Really focus in on that and make sure that you carry that through each season. Because I think it's important to see, how a collection moves on from one season to the next, but also thinking about who your customer is, making sure that you are focusing, you know, what your collection is made up of into what your customers are buying from you. What are you hearing from them? Don't necessarily listen to trends. I think you can have your own trend, but I think you need to be true to who you are and really kind of listen to the feedback that your customers are giving you, and analyze the information that you have.
That's so good. Oh my gosh, Thea, you are just a wealth of knowledge. And I know you are helping so many people here because we don't always get these insights. So, thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. And are you, like, social? Are you online? Like, do you want people to connect with you? How can people find you?
Yes, of course. Yes, I'm on social. I'm on online. I don't have a website, but I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram.
Amazing. So we'll make sure to link everything in the description of this episode. But thank you so much for your insight, and we hope to have you back soon, maybe in the future.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, I would love to. If there's anything else you need from me, just let me know.
Amazing. All right, Thea, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.